For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires, and will turn away their ears from the truth, and will turn aside to myths. That's Second Timothy chapter 4, 3-4. One of my favorite quotes from scripture. No wonder there's a whole bunch of different esoteric and occult doctrine spurning the anger of the Lord there. Anyway, welcome back to the Justified Belief podcast. I'm your host, Luca. Thank you to all my loyal fan for continuing to listen to and supporting this podcast. Your guys' feedback helped form the basis of the topic for today's episode, which is about the occult magician and author Aleister Crowley. Now, Alistar wrote many books, poems, and short stories, but today we're going to focus in on his occult religion known as Thelema and its writings. This is something that's been in the pipeline for a while, and I'm glad to finally share it with you all. And again, just a quick sidebar note, there's a lot that can be discussed with Alistar. I'm just going to give you the quick summary of his background, just so you have an idea of kind of who he was if it's your first time hearing the name. And if you don't know who he is, this is going to be the crash course of his background, and we're mainly going to be focusing on the occult religion that he created called Thelema. So, who was Aleister Crowley? Alistar's real name was Edward Crowley, and he was born in 1875 in Warwickshire, England, into a deeply Christian family. His father was actually a preacher, and his entire family was part of a Christian religious group called the Plymouth Brethren. Plymouth Brethren focused on living a pious, humble life, focusing their attention on their faith in God, and believing that in their inherited wealth, which they were very wealthy, was actually just a distraction keeping them from the faith. As a youth, Alistar had a tumultuous life from his own doing, so much so that his own mother named him the Beast. In 1887, his father died due to tongue cancer, which devastated him and drove him into feelings of anger and his despair. In some of his later writings, he would describe that his father was actually his hero, and he very much looked up to him. Eventually, Alistar became sick and was sent away to live with an uncle due to his further misbehavings, coupled with the fact that he was sick. This was a turning point in his life where he began turning away from God and his religious family connections, but he maintained a serious belief in the spiritual and supernatural world, and he eventually began dabbling in the occult. At age 20, he enrolled in Cambridge University, England, where he changed his name from Edward to Alistar. As soon as he got control of his vast inheritance, he dropped out of university, and that's when he began seriously studying the occult, which was motivated by his thirst to expand his own spiritual power and knowledge. With this dabbling into the occult came a focused drive to do as much debauchery as possible, all in the name of occult magic and wisdom. He began doing drugs heavily, visiting prostitutes, and doing whatever he could just to pursue pure hedonism. Coupled with his love of the occult and having sex with random women and sometimes men, Crowley eventually started to feed his interest in depraved ritualistic sex magic, which involved many orgies, blood-drinking rituals, and all sorts of sordid and heinous sex acts, including forced sadomasochism. And this is putting it lightly. There are some terrible things that have been recorded involving Alistar and some of his sex rituals that I don't want to dive too deep in, but we're just going to leave it at that, the forced sadomasochism. Throughout his time, while trying to learn as much as he could about occult rituals and spells, he also developed a bit of a fondness for writing literature. He wrote many poems and books, some of which are banned or are near impossible to find due to their explicit content, and they were very jarring at the time that some of his publications were made in very small volumes or not even disseminated enough for many people to get their hands on. He continued writing in tandem with his mission to gather as much occult knowledge as he could throughout his life. Crowley was very interested in specifically learning spells and rituals that would allow him to commune with and summon demons, which one day turned out to be successful. One night, while on his honeymoon in Egypt, he successfully summoned a spirit which possessed his then wife, Rose Cayley. She began acting erratic, thrashing and writhing about on the floor of their rented apartment in Egypt, and eventually, when she came back to her senses, she told Crowley that the spirit that entered her body was that of an Egyptian god. She then led Crowley to a nearby museum where she actually pointed to an ancient Egyptian stele that was on display. So, and what a stele is, for those of you who might not know, is it's just a stone tablet with hieroglyphs. Now, what was interesting was that specific stele she pointed to coincidentally had the museum catalog number of 666, the biblical number of the beast. Crowley then took this as being proof that the ritual was a success, and Rose was now in communication with the occult world. And the specific Egyptian god depicted on the stele that she pointed to was that of the Egyptian god Horus. Rose later gave Crowley the instructions that she received from Horus, and the instructions were actually for a magic ritual that would allow Crowley to commune with his guardian angel named Aiwass. The specific details of this ritual were recorded by Crowley, and it's titled as Libre Samekah. The details of the ritual are way too lengthy to recount here on this episode, but essentially it involves many spoken invocations in different languages, a partner, and a bunch of sigils and walking around in circles. Once the ritual was completed, Crowley began receiving visions from his guardian angel, Aiwass, who in turn told Crowley that the equinox of the gods was upon them and humanity would be entering a new spiritual era, one that Crowley would lead. Crowley then began writing these revelations down, which in turn created the religion of Thelema and his prophetic book called the Book of the Law. Crowley was thusly the self-proclaimed prophet and leader of Thelema. Now, again, this was just a very short biography of Crowley. I couldn't get into who he learned the occult rituals from. Some of them were from established secret societies like the Order of the Golden Dawn, which already had their own occult rituals and spells and that sort of deal. Crowley was also friends with Jack Parsons, and Jack Parsons is a big name in the occult world and is believed to have actually opened up a portal to another dimension in like 1950, I want to say. And that's why now we have these so-called stories of entities appearing as aliens. And I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds with that one. It is very interesting. I will do an episode on that. But yeah, he did know Jack Parsons, which is very interesting to me. But we're going to segue now into Thelema. So it's a 5-volume book, but we will just be focusing on the first volume here and discuss some of the belief system. And I want to just start by saying the most important thing to remember is that the central tenet of the religion of Thelema is the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And I'm sure some of my music fans out there may immediately get the reference because there are some big name artists out there who espouse the same belief system and know all the occult symbolism some of your tinfoil hat friends point out in Hollywood media these days. That is not a coincidence. You will notice, as I pointed out previously with previous podcast episodes about cult beliefs and esoteric doctrine, the common theme is me, I. And everything about you and your wants, barring the wants and needs of your neighbor and humanity as a whole. It's very me-centered, very I-centered. The whole thing is very narcissistic. Anyway, I digress. Let's check out the first writing from the Book of the Law. "Let my servants be few and secret. They shall rule the many and the known." Like with most esoteric groups, Thelema focuses on that small, elite number of quote-unquote enlightened individuals taking special charge of everything. Who calls us Thelemites will do no wrong, if he look but close into the world, the Thelema, book of the law, for there are therein 3 grades, the hermit, and the lover, and the man of earth. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. So the hermit, the lover, and the man of the earth refers to hermetic symbols, which represent the following. So the symbol of the hermit is meant to represent wisdom, spiritual enlightenment, and inner guidance. The symbol of the lover represents love, deep connection, and attraction. It's supposed to embody the idea of unconditional love. Finally, the symbol of the man of earth, which is also referred to as the king of pentacles, pentacles with a P, is meant to represent material well-being, practicality, and groundedness. So for there are therein 3 grades, the hermit, the lover, the man of earth. He is describing the 3 levels of consciousness within Thelema. Now, the next writing here, the word of sin is restricted, O man. Refuse not thy wife if she will, O lover. If thou wilt depart, there is no bond that can unite the divided but love. All else is accursed, accursed, accursed. Be it to the aeons hell. Let it be that state of manyhood bound in loathing. So with thy all, thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay, for pure will, unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect. Be goodly, therefore dress ye all in fine apparel, eat rich foods, and drink sweet wines, and wines that foam. Also take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will, but always unto me. This truly is the doctrines of the devil. It doesn't, in my opinion, take much to see why living your life at the whim of your lusts and desires is extremely dangerous and self-destructive. Anyway, continuing on. Invoke me under the stars, love is the law, love under will, nor let the fools mistake love, for there are love and love. There is the dove, and there is the serpent. Choose ye well. He, my prophet, hath chosen, knowing the law of the fortress, and the great mystery of the house of God. All these old letters of my book are aright, but Zadi is not the star. This also is secret. My prophet shall reveal it to the wise. So the Hebrew letter here, that word Sadi, and this is actually a Kabbalah reference he is making because the symbol represents righteous humility, but specifically the righteousness of Yahweh God in the book of Psalm in his physical form as Yeshua, Jesus. And if you guys haven't heard the episode on the Kabbalah, definitely check it out to fill you in a little bit more about that Jewish mysticism, that esoteric doctrine. It's a strange one. But Crowley here is essentially blaspheming Jesus by saying he is not God, but instead he, Crowley, is. I also like to point out, too, his idea of love is very twisted. His idea of love is self-gratification and fulfilling the desires of the flesh. I'm sure all of us know people who live in this way, and we ourselves may have lived in this way as well. And we all know how harmful and destructive that can be when you have a selfish love for yourself and for pursuing worldly desires, something that biblically is spoken out against many a time, and with good reason. So continuing on here, hear me, ye people of sighing. The sorrows of pain and regret are left to the dead and not the dying. The folk that not know me as yet, these are dead, these fellows, they feel not. We are not for the poor and sad. The lords of the earth are our kinfolk. Is a God to live in a dog? No, the highest are of us. They shall rejoice, are chosen, who sorroweth is not of us. We have nothing with the outcasts and the unfit. Let them die in their misery, for they feel not compassion in the voice of kings. Stamp down the wretched and the weak. This is the law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Think not, O king, upon that lie that thou must die. Verily thou shalt not die, but live. Now let it be understood, if the body of the king dissolve, he shall remain in pure ecstasy forever. I don't mean to be a broken record, but this is the stuff that really attracts self centered individuals. Having compassion for those who are downtrodden or weak is not a vice and is not bad. Not only is it a noble quality, and that's something Jesus calls us to do, which is to have compassion and understanding, but it's also just being a decent human being. But you can see how these types of doctrines may have folks who are very wealthy and powerful gravitate towards it because it's opening a door for them to think that being terrible individuals is something that is divine and is okay. And we're pretty much at the point too where I've done a bunch of different uh, introductions and reviews of these esoteric doctrines, and they all have that same core theme that there's a select quote unquote enlightened elite, and everybody else is just profane, is the buzzword that they like to use in those circles, right? Everybody else is profane and basically beneath the elite. And like I said, the only people who want to align themselves with this are people who have evil intentions. But as always, I pray, and I know a lot of my other brothers and sisters in Christ out there pray for these individuals that God removes the cataracts from their spiritual cataracts from their eyes. And I've said it before, the powers to be that follow these types of occult and esoteric doctrines look at the general populace as human-shaped cattle. They smile and shout for humanitarian acts and compassion for people, but in reality, they want to oppress the common person, or these, like I said, profanes, as the occult teaches. Anyone who's not enlightened is profane in the eyes of the cult and not worthy. Crowley continues on to write, I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness. To worship me, take wine and strange drugs, whereof I will tell my prophet, and be drunk thereof. They shall not harm ye at all. It is a lie, this folly against self. The exposure of innocence is a lie. Be strong, O man, lust, enjoy all things of sense and rapture. Fear not that any God shall deny thee of this. I am alone. There is no God where I am. So the snake is an occult symbol of wisdom, but also infinity, life-giving by life-taking. You guys may have seen the symbol. It's pretty much always depicted as the serpent eating its tail. Crowley is espousing to be wise and endless here. I hope now it's also painfully clear, this plus other things we have discussed about Satanism, esoteric groups, and occult groups. Again, not to be a broken record, the theme is the same. It is anti-life. It is slavery to the flesh and to unbridled desires that are self-destructive. This is something Jesus repeatedly warns us about and has freed us from. The absolute hilarity of this all is that Jesus gives life and wants to give it to us abundantly, but the occult is anti-life. It is the doctrine of Satan. It is self-destructive, but to many people are spiritually weak and blinded and offer up no resistance to desires of the flesh, and so they're simply carried off by their frivolous passions. And it's permeating into our mainstream culture as we speak. We're seeing the ramifications of turning from God and giving ourselves up to desires like Crowley did. Things are progressively getting worse the more we move away from God, and some folks just don't want to admit it. Nothing good can come of this type of doctrine, especially here where he espouses to be the one who stirs up the desire to want to be filled with drunkenness, telling people here to worship me, take wine and strange drugs, whereof I will tell my prophet, and be drunk thereof. They shall not harm you. Believing that drugs and alcohol aren't going to harm you is absolutely insane. But people believe this. And I just want to note, too, for anybody who does practice the occult, esoteric doctrines and lifestyles, this Kabbalistic doctrine opens the door for this, because in the Kabbalistic doctrine, there is no God. There is the spirit of God, the eminence of God, but not like a physical deity, but more of an energy, right? And I don't want to go too far off into the weeds because I did a whole episode about it. But Kabbalistic doctrine focuses on these life energies that are meant to be a culmination of the actual entity of God via these cosmic energies. But at the end of the day, there's no basis for a moral foundation within Kabbalistic doctrine. And that's why people flock to it, because you can basically do whatever you want, bar any type of backlash for doing very bad or heinous things. Anyway, there is a veil. That veil is black. It is the veil of the modest woman. It is the veil of sorrow and the pall of death. This is none of me. Tear down that lying specter of the centuries. Veil not your vices and virtuous words. These vices are my service. Ye do well, and I will reward you here and hereafter. Crowley was real big into thoughts, in case you couldn't tell. So it makes sense that his religion would promote hoeing. And I want to just point out with this verse here, modesty and conquering your vices, those are not bad things. And it takes a very strong individual to submit the flesh. And this is something that, again, Christ talks about. And this is one reason why I like to share these things with you guys, you know, and yes, this is a Christian podcast, but it is important to understand these occult doctrines. So when you see it permeating out of certain Christian groups, you know what it is, because the Kabbalistic foundation has been laid by these groups, and it's starting to creep into certain aspects of New Age Christianity. New Age Christianity is Kabbalistic doctrine with a Jesus sticker slapped on the side that says "Good to go, Chief," but it's not good to go. This is a dangerous, dangerous doctrine, and this is one of the many occult beliefs that spawn because of this concept of Kabbalah. So overall, the first volume is pretty short, and I hit the core highlights for you all. The central theme is do thy will, but not God's will, which is righteous. Instead of our own depraved, misguided will and centralizing power to the enlightened few, as with much of the occult teachings, the core principle remains the same, self-serving and me-centered, but they are just dressed differently from group to group. It is the same message, tossing God's will out and God's humanity and his righteousness and replacing it with our own twisted version of the concept of God. Hope you guys found that interesting. As always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share this video. It really helps the channel out. And feel free, when you have a chance, go and check out my Patreon. It is free to join. I will be having some merchandise here coming soon. So if that's something that interests you, definitely get on that so you can stay up to date on all the any merchandise that comes out in the future. Other than that, God bless you all, and we'll see you at the next one.